Welcome back to another episode of School of Airway. A little bit of background music because my voice can get monotonous and people can fall asleep. So we're going to talk about pediatric airways. Okay? Why do we talk about this like a special entity from adults? It's because it's rare to intubate a child. Right? Very few kids have such bad lungs unless they're set up for failure. Genetics, family history of asthma. Kid who was born premature or had a bad case of underdeveloped lungs, not enough surfactant development, or the patient has bad bronchiolitis. These airways are very small, and any plugging of mucus, phlegm will cause obstruction, stridor, increased work of breathing. All right. So, because kids are hard, or not hard, but rarely intubated, this is why we consider them hard. If we were intubating kids all the time, every day, as much as adults, this would not be a challenge. It would be like butter, very easy intubation. But there are things that make the child a little bit challenging with intubation. Since it's rarely done, people believe certain myths. You have to use a Miller blade, not a Mac blade. There's some things I've realized in life, maybe not all the so-called truisms are true. Some of them are just voodoo medicine. The kid has a big head, so such a big head that maybe you don't need so many such ramping like for an adult. Maybe you just need a chuck or a pillow to put underneath the head to align the ear to sternal notch. Now the child's head is large, but the mouth is pretty small compared to its tongue. The tongue size, diameter, and width ratio compared to the mouth is astounding. All right, so it can automatically make some relatively airway obstruction from just being relaxed, respiratory depressed, from CNS depression, from an overdose, while they did heroin while the child was as a fetus, and when he was delivered he was limp and not breathing, or the patient found some pills around the house. This child is set up for failure in that it's almost like an obese person. Small mouth, big tongue. Alright, and the key is here, because most of these children are going to be less than 8 years old or 10 years old. This neck, which is usually my friend for adults, is usually considered taboo. And the only thing that people have allowed is either a formal tracheostomy, which is rarely done on kids emergently, or a needle crike, which is even more rarely done. All right, and more rarely people don't have the equipment to do that. So people try to intubate through the mouth, almost never through the nose. And if they go through the mouth, they use an LMA to oxygenate the patient, or they use a BVM with a face mask to bag up or pre-oxygenate the patient, or for rescue oxygenation, or they use regular laryngoscopes, mostly Millers. That's what the myth has been said, that it works because the tongue is so large and the patient has such a redundantly long epiglottis that's like some people will say octagonal or squared off or hexagonal or octagon-like shaped. Regardless, it's redundant with its width, how it lays over the vocal cords, the glottic opening, and it's redundant because it's long. So people assume the Miller blade would be the best to use for successful intubation of this infant, this child. The only thing, children's, at least in America, are always full. Right? Usually not full of bowel, full of stool, but they're usually full of breast milk, longevity, candy, nachos, juice, water, milk, what have you. Their stomachs are usually full, and if their stomachs are usually full, hey, that volcano can erupt at any time. All right. So please address the child as you would an adult. Position the patient, pre-oxygenate, a face mask, high flow oxygen. All right. Connected to a reservoir, full, 15 liters most, even higher, until you hear the oxygen filling up the reservoir bag. For the face mask, it'll be nice to have a nasal cannula, but if not, this face mask should do a pretty good job. If the child is apneic, you'll have to bag up the child, bag up the child actively to get pre-oxygenated correctly and to an adequate number that you feel safe to allow a safe period of apnea when you do the RSI. And maybe the child is so out, maybe the patient has no pulse, so you don't need to get medicines. Find the appropriate size BVM. Don't bag with 2 hands, and aim for a respiratory rate of 30 if it's truly a small child infant. When the child starts to be 8 or 10 years old, you're trying to aim for every 3 seconds squeeze and a recoil. So every 3 Mississippis, I guess you should be bagging. And the closer they are to teenagers above 15, the closer it is to the magic number of 12, 10 to 12. Pubic hairs, they vote or have sex or buy goats, or they're adults, considered adults in other countries, bag them to that rate. Every 5 seconds or every 6 seconds, Mississippis. Okay. Now, you can use stylettes. I don't see that many bougies set up for kids. I know they exist. And the old adage used to be that ET tubes had to be uncuffed. And the assumption was the narrowest point of the airway was at the cricoid membrane. So narrow that if you put a tube that barely squeezed through, and if you estimated the correct age for this patient, you get the largest ET tube that can sliver through. What if the formula is off and you pick a tube that's too small? There's going to definitely be aspiration if there's vomiting above. That's the only protection, was the narrowing of the cricoid membrane to prevent aspiration. And then guess what? When you put them on vents, there's a leak. The machine detects a leak. So if you put a cuff, less leak, less likely for aspirations. So people were afraid of subglottic stenosis from cuffs before. I guess the cuffs have changed, less inflation. And now people have to have the dilemma of deciding what formula to use. Instead of age over 4+ for uncuffed tubes, now they have to figure out either it's going to be age over 4+3 or 3.5. It winds up being a 0.5 size smaller almost all the time. Once in a blue moon, it'll be a 1 size smaller. But the cuff allows the tube to be a little smaller and less aspiration. The only downside, the tube does get slightly smaller, a lot more turbulence, a lot more suctioning, a lot likely to get mucus plugging. Alright, so this is part 1 of pediatric airways. And I'm going to show you on a mannequin that you can intubate a patient with a MAC blade. The Miller only is a myth. Please come back for another episode of School Airway. And I hope you enjoyed my soundtrack as I'm talking. Goodbye.